بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك، وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين. في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له ولي، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره، وحمده الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يدا، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم أذنت، اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير، مع حاجة بي إليه عظيمة، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وصفحك عن ظلمي، وسترك على قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي، عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي. أطمئني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وأريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك أدعوك آمنا وأسألك مستأنسا، لا خائفا ولا وجلا مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك، فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي يبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلما أرى مولا كريما أصبر على عبد ليم منك علي يا رب، إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك، كأن لي التطول عليك، فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك، فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح خالق الإصباح ديار الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق خالق الإصباح ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله ولا شبيه يشاكله ولا ظهير يعاضده، قهر بعزته الأعزاء وتواضع لعظمته العظماء، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصيه، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازيه، فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وباجة مونقة قد راني، فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه ولا يغلق بابه ولا يرد سائله ولا يخيب عامله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين ويرفع المستضعفين ويضع المستكبرين ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاصم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها، وترجف الأرض وعمارها، وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق، ويرزق ولا يرزق، ويطعم ولا يطعم، ويميت الأحياء ويحيي الموتى، وهو حي لا يموت، بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك، أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادتك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم صل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك، استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله، مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له وابدله من بعد خوفه أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه واعزز به وانصره وانتصر به وانصره نصرا عزيزا وافتح له فتحا يسيرا واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم اظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملنا، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغنا. اللهم المم به شعثنا، واشعب به صدعنا، وارتق به فتقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، واعزز به ذلتنا، واغني به عائلنا، واقضي به عن مغرمنا، واجبر به فقرنا، وسد به خلتنا، ويسر به عسرنا، وبيض به وجوهنا، وفك به أسرنا، وانجح به طلبتنا، وانجز به مواعيدنا، واستجب به دعوتنا، وأعطنا به سؤلنا، وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا، وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشفي به صدورنا، وأذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، وغيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتضاخر الزمان علينا. فصل على محمد وآله، وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله، وبضر تكشفه، ونصر تعزه، وسلطان حق تظهره، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم برحمتك في الصالحين فاخذلنا، وفي علين فارفعنا، وبكأس من معين من عين سلسبيل فاسقنا، ومن الحور العين برحمتك فزوجنا، ومن الولدان المخلدين كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون فأخدمنا، ومن ثمار الجنة ولحوم الطير فأطعمنا، ومن ثياب السندس والحرير والأستبرق فألبسنا، وليلة القدر وحج بيتك الحرام وقتلا في سبيلك فوفق لنا، وصالح الدعاء والمسألة فاستجب لنا. وإذا جمعت الأولين والآخرين يوم القيامة فارحمنا، وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا، وفي جهنم فلا تغلنا، وفي عذابك وهوانك فلا تبتلنا، ومن الزقوم والضريع فلا تطعمنا، ومع الشياطين فلا تجعلنا، وفي النار على وجوهنا فلا تكببنا، ومن ثياب النار وسرابيل القطران فلا تلبسنا، ومن كل سوء يا لا إله إلا أنت، بحق لا إله إلا أنت فنجنا. اللهم إني أسألك أن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر من الأمر المحتوم في الأمر الحكيم، من القضاء الذي لا يرد ولا يبدل، أن تكتبني من حجاج بيتك الحرام المبرور حجهم، المشكور سعيهم، المغفور ذنوبهم، المكفر عن سيئاتهم، وأن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر أن تطيل عمري في خير وعافية، وتوسع في رزقي، وتجعلني ممن تنتصر به لدينك، ولا تستبدل بي غيري. إلهي وقف السائلون ببابك، ولان الفقراء بجنابك، ووقفت سفينة المساكين على ساحل بحر جودك وكرمك، يرجون الجواز إلى ساحة رحمتك ونعمتك. إلهي كنت لا ترحم في هذا الشهر الشريف إلا لمن أخلص لك في صيامه وقيامه، فمن للمذنب المقصر إذا غرق في بحر ذنوبه وآثامه. إلهي كنت لا ترحم إلا للمطيعين، فمن للعاصين، وإن كنت لا تقبل إلا من العاملين، فمن للمقصرين. إلهي ربح الصائمون وفاز القائمون ونجا المخلصون، ونحن عبيدك المذنبون، فارحمنا برحمتك، واعتقنا من النار بعفوك، واغفر لنا ذنوبنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Please recite the Fatiha for البنين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نون والقلم وما يسطرون. وإن لك لأجرا غير ممنون. نون والقلم وما يسطرون ما أنت بنعمة ربك بمجنون. وإن لك لأجرا غير ممنون وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم. فستبصر ويبصرون بأيكم المفتون. إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين. فلا تطع المكذبين ودوا لو تدهن فيدهنون ولا تطع كل هلاف مهين. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
صل على محمد وآل محمد. So I welcome you all to this 8th Majlis by Muhibban al-Mahdi. So inshallah shortly we'll have a lecture followed by Salah and then there'll be iftar. So I do encourage everybody to stay right to the end. So can I also ask some of the brothers to come a bit forward? So can I please invite Syed with a loud salawat?
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين، الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين، والذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد كتبنا في الزبور من بعد الذكر أن الأرض يرثها عبادي الصالحون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. For the hastening of the reappearance of the Master of our time, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The days of this blessed month continue to pass us by. Yesterday we passed that night which was amongst the nights of Qadr. And amongst one of the actions that we carried out upon that night is that we placed the Quran over our heads. We said, "O Allah, through the right of this book that you revealed, we took the name of each member of Ahlul Bayt, bi Muhammadin, bi Aliyin, bi Fatimata, bil Hassani, bil Hussein, all the way until the end when we said bil Hujja, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif." The purpose of this action, it was a twofold action. From one angle, we carried out the Quranic ordainment that when we pray to Allah, put an intermediary before yourself and Allah, those intermediaries who are close to Allah. As the Quran, it says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ittaqullah wabtaghu ilayhil wasila. That, O you who believe, fear Allah and seek nearness through Him by the means of an intermediary. But you find from the second angle, the reason that we carry out this act is that we are saying, in other words, O Allah, as upon this night we have put your book over our head, on this night we are making a renewed covenant towards your book, O Allah. That in this upcoming year, when you write our decree, write closeness to this book, write closeness towards these individuals whose names we took when the book was over our head. You find for our religion, it stands on two pillars. One pillar is the Quran, the other is the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. As I mentioned a couple nights ago when I looked at Hadith al-Thaqalain, I mentioned that the Quran is the inheritance and the Ahlul Bayt are the inheritors of the book. And in today's world, if we see the Quran, the inheritance still with us, that means there must be an inheritor of the book in today's world as well. And in tonight's majlis, the topic which I picked is examining the position of that inheritor, examining the position of Imam al-Mahdi within the Holy Quran. Because you find that these nights where our spirituality is heightened, these nights where we increase our God consciousness, these are those nights where the fuel is increased to serve the Imam of our time. But when it comes to this Imam, you find when we examine this topic, there are a number of benefits to this topic. From the first angle, didn't the Prophet of God say, Man mata walam ya'rif imama zamanihi mata mitatin jahiliya. That the one who dies without recognizing the imam of his time has died the death of somebody in the age of ignorance. You see, one essential part of knowing the Imam of our time is to recognize the position of the Imam in the Holy Quran, the Book of Allah. That if I were to ask you that how many verses of the Quran do you know in relation to the Imam of the time, how many verses would you be able to give me? Because the reality is this, as this Imam is the one who is awaited by every single group, that every religion waits this imam, that the Christians, they wait for the coming of Jesus, the Jews, they wait for a Messiah, the Hindus are waiting for a Messiah. Every group is waiting for this individual who will bring peace and justice upon the earth. Then this individual must have a position within the Holy Quran. And in tonight's discussion, we'll look at his position from a number of angles. Number one, what are the different categories that make the Quran a miracle? And which of these categories is related to the Imam of our time? Number two, what are some of the verses that relate to the present Imam? And how many verses does the famous 17th century scholar Syed Hashim al-Bahrani in his famous work Al-Muhajja Fima Nazala Fil Qa'im al-Hujja say were revealed about the 12th Imam? Number three, what do other members of the Ahlul Bayt say about this Imam, and with what respect do they view this Imam? And number four, what is the reality awaiting for this Imam? So we'll go upon these four angles until we can better understand the subject of the position of the Imam within the Holy Quran. With one salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You find that the Holy Quran, it goes without saying, is the miracle of the Prophet. And there are a number of aspects which make it like no other book. There are a number of aspects which make it a miracle. For example, I mentioned the fact that the Quran is the only book which issues open challenges to mankind. No other book issued an open challenge. The Quran, it said that bring the likes of this Quran. Then it said bring 10 chapters like this Quran. Then it said bring one chapter like this Quran. But humanity, they failed to do so. But you find throughout the Quran, the first category of the miracle are these open challenges. Another open challenge the Quran, it makes. It says what? It says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. فَلَوْلَا إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُبْصِرُونَ فَلَوْلَا إِن كُنْتُمْ غَيْرَ مَدِينِينَ تَرْجِعُونَهَا إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. The Quran in these verses, it issues a challenge. The challenge goes like this, is that if you are able to carry this out, then we will leave our faith. That if you are able to do this, then all of our premises there are false. The Quran, it says, فَلَوْلَا, but we are closer to him, but you do not see. And if you are not constrained, if authority is not over you, then return the soul if you are truthful. The Quran is issuing an open challenge that we have science, we have medicine. The best we can do is cure a person. We can delay death, we can heal the person. But the Quran is saying, if you're able to do one simple thing, then all of our premises, they collapse. What you're saying is true, not what we are saying is true. And that simple thing is this, is that the moment an individual dies, return the soul back to his body. That all you can do is prevent. You have medicine to prevent. But is there anything to bring the dead back to life? You find there is nothing to bring the dead back to life. This was an open challenge of the Quran, and none can issue an open challenge with this much confidence unless they're on the path of truth. That's what Amir al-Mu'mineen did as well when he said, Saluni, Saluni, qabla an tafqiduni, ask me before you lose me. That no nobody in history had the audacity to say these lines that ask me before you lose me, I can answer any questions. But the only person who can issue this challenge is that person who has understood truth completely and is upon truth completely. So you find the first category of the miracles of the Quran are the open challenges. And there's many categories, I'll only analyze a few. From the second angle, you find that the Quran was a miracle in terms of the linguistics. You know, every language has two categories. There is poetry, there is prose. Poetry, rhymes, there's different styles to it, as you know. Prose is straightforward speech. The same thing in Arabic. You find the poetry was called nasr, then they have nazam. But when the Quran was revealed, neither was the Quran poetry, nor was it prose and straightforward speech. So Arabic became that language that there were three categories of speech. The first was nasr, the second was nazam, the third was Quran. For Quran itself was a unique category. And when you look at the linguistics of the Quran, there are certain things which fascinate the human being. For example, if I said to you, say this line, where the spelling of the line is the same frontwards as backwards. Say, glorify your Lord and glory belongs to him. Can you write a sentence, a palindrome as it's called, where every letter forward is the same backwards? The Quran, within the Holy Quran, the verse, it comes up, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. This wow, it begins the sentence. Then after that you look, Rabbaka fakabbir. What is the first letter? The first letter is Ra. The second letter, Rabbaka fakabbir. The second letter from backwards and forwards is the Ba. The third letter from backwards and forwards is what? Rabbaka fakabbir. Is that Kaf. That you look at this and the Fa is in the middle. You see this sentence. The Quran, it says this line the same way forward as it is backwards. No, I'll give you another example. And this is a more contemporary example because when this verse was shown towards a professor in one famous university, he replied by saying that this verse shows the Quran is nonsense. What was the verse? The verse, it said, ما جعل الله لرجل قلبين في جوفه. It says ما جعل الله لرجل قلبين في جوفه. That Allah has not made for any man two hearts within his body. This professor, when one of his students shows him this verse, he says this is nonsense. That it's saying that there are no two hearts in any man. Why is the Quran discriminating? Why does it say لِرَجُلٍ for men? Isn't it the same case with women? You find that the reply came, there are times when a woman has two hearts within her body at the time period of pregnancy and the child is within the womb. At that time, there are two hearts within the body. But look at the words of Allah, how specific they were. You know what? I'll give you one more linguistic example, then I'll move on. You look at Surah Al-Baqarah. The Quran was not revealed in book form. It was revealed onto the heart of the Prophet. It was a sonorous revelation that Jibreel would give it towards the Prophet. Surah Al-Baqarah was revealed over a number of years, whether it's 8, whether it's 10, whatever it is. It was revealed over a number of years. Surah Al-Baqarah has 286 verses. One of the verses of Surah Al-Baqarah is وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We have made you a middle nation. You want to look at the miracle of the Quran. Look at where this verse it falls. This verse is number 143 within Surah Al-Baqarah. That of chapter with 286. It says, we have made you a middle nation. In a chapter which was revealed over 10 years, you find that this verse, which says middle, comes in the middle of the chapter. So you find this was another reality of the Quran. But the third category, which I'll analyze, and this is that category which relates to the Imam of the time, are the predictions within the Holy Quran. You see, the Quran, it made predictions about the future which withstood the test of times. For example, it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alif, لام ميم غلبت الروم في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون. That it says what? It says that the Romans have been conquered in a nearby land, and after being conquered they themselves will conquer. Then it says what? It says in a number of years they will carry out this conquer, and all affairs belong to Allah from before and after, and the believers, they will rejoice upon this. You know, this verse, it was revealed that Rasulullah, he sent letters to both the Sassanids, to Khosrow Parvez, the Iranians, the Persians, and to the Romans as well. So you find when the Romans, they got the letter, they didn't accept Islam, but they showed it respect. They were monotheists, they were Christians at that time. Of course, they diverted away. But the second group, Khosrow Parvez, when he sees the letter, he rips it up. At that time, a battle was going on with the Romans and the Persians. The Persians have defeated the Romans. The kuffar of Quraysh, when they saw the Persians had defeated the Romans, they assumed it to be a good omen for themselves. Why? Because the Persians at that time were polytheists and the Romans were monotheists. They said that this omen, it refers to us, that us, the polytheists of Quraysh, us, the kuffar, will conquer the Muslims. But you find this verse, it comes down. It says the Romans will defeat them after they themselves have been defeated. Imagine, once an army is destroyed, it takes time for an army to be rebuilt. But this Quran, it said, within a few years, the Romans would defeat them, and you find the reality, it materialized. And this Quran, you find this verse, this chapter of the Quran, it began with Alif Lam Mim, Ghulibat ar-Rum. You find certain chapters of the Quran, when they begin with the same letters, they have the same theme. So for example, there are chapters of the Quran that begin with Ha Mim. These chapters collectively are called the Hawamim. The similar theme amongst them, it talks about the blessings which the human being have. Another example, the chapters which start with Qul. There's 5 of them, but 4 are famous. All of them are related to Tawheed. The chapters that start with Inna, all of them are related to the blessings the believers have received. For example, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, that we revealed it on the night of Qadr. This is of the blessing of the Quran. Surah An-Nuh, Inna arsalna Nuhan ila qawmihi. This is for the blessing of prophethood. Then it says what? It says, Inna fatahna laka fatham mubin, that we have given you a manifest victory, O Prophet, that the peace treaty of Hudaybiyah was called a manifest victory. And you know, this is the way of the Quran, that Badr, Khaybar, Khandaq, Uhud, none of them were called a manifest victory, but the peace treaty of the Prophet was called a manifest victory. This is about this blessing. The 4th verse with Inna a'tayna kal kautar. O Prophet, we have given you kautar. Which blessing is this talking about? If you want to understand the reality of this blessing, the 3rd verse does the tafsir of the 1st verse. It says, Inna a'tayna kal kautar fasalli li rabbika wanhar. Inna shani'aka huwal absar. That, O Prophet, that Allah is taking pride. We have given you kautar. So pray to your Lord, and your enemies are without a lineage. If the 3rd verse says the enemies are without a lineage, then this kautar must be a reference to the lineage of Rasulullah. It must be a reference to Fatimatul Zahra. And this verse, it talks about the blessing of the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt. So you see that this point it started, that the verses which are similar in beginning, they often have similar themes. In the same way, there are 29 chapters of the Quran that start with the huruful muqatta'at, that those disjoint letters. And all of those, after they mention the disjoint letter, they mention the praises of the Quran. For example, Alif, Lam, Mim, Dalikal Kitabu La Rayba Fi Hudan Lil Muttaqeen. That Alif Lam Mim, there is no doubt within this book. Yasin wal Quran al Hakim. Yasin, by this wise book. In the same way, you find that this chapter it looked from the outward angle to be different. That it didn't seem to be talking about the Quran right after the disjoint letters, but you find in reality it was. When it says Alif Lam Mim Ghulibat Rum, this was a reference to the miracle of the Quran, to the fact that the Quran, it made predictions which nobody else would believe until they materialized. You find another prediction in the Quran. The Quran, it says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab, ma aghna anhu maluhu wa ma kasab. That may the hands of Abu Lahab perish, and may he perish. And his wealth and his children, they won't what? They won't benefit him. What he's earned won't benefit him. You know, all Abu Lahab had to say is, Ashadu an la ilaha illallah, the Quran would have been falsified. That the Quran is making a prediction that Abu Lahab is going to be perished. All he has to say in 10 years is Ashadu an la ilaha illallah. But you find the reality is that the Quran, it predicted that he would remain upon his disbelief, and his wealth and his children, they won't help him, to such an extent that when Abu Lahab dies, there was so much stench coming from his body that his children would stand from a distance and throw dust upon his body. They would throw dirt upon his body. That to the extent they didn't want to help them that much. And this is that category of the miraculous nature of the Quran known as predictions. But question, how does this category relate to the Imam of our time? The answer is this, is that there are a number of verses of the Quran whose outcome we have not seen actualized. If there was no Imam of the time, people could say that this Quran, it made predictions which did not actualize. That every verse of the Quran whose outcome we have not seen, that outcome will be seen through the hands of the Imam of our time. And I come to the verses of the Quran. The first verse, I'll give you an example, is chapter 21, verse 105, where it says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِن بَعْدِ الذِّكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. It said, we had written in the Zabur after the dhikr, after the remembrance, after the Torah, that this earth will be inherited by the righteous servants. You know the verse, it says, Annal arda, al arda. This alif lam over here signifies that the entire earth will be inherited by these righteous servants. I say, if the Imam didn't have a position within the Quran, show me in history a rule where the believers had ruled from the east to the west. That there has been no rule where that rule has been all encompassing over the earth. But you find our fifth Imam would state that this verse is in reference to the companions of Al-Qa'im, that through the hands of Al-Qa'im they would be able to conquer, they will rule all over the earth. And then he says, I heard my grandfather Rasulullah say that if there was only one day upon this earth, Allah would prolong that day to such an extent that the rising of his hujjah would occur upon that day. You see, there are a number of verses. This was just one example. And you know, Sayyid Hashim al-Bahrani, a 17th century scholar, in his famous work Al-Muhajjah, he says that there are 132 verses of the Quran related towards the 12th Imam. There are 132 verses, either on their outward tafsir or in their inward ta'wil, that relate towards towards the Imam of our time. That in the narrations of Ahlul Bayt, 132 verses. And you find Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan, he comments on 8 of those verses, and Tabarsi and Majma'ul Bayan comments on 9 of those verses. So I'll mention those 8 or 9 common verses. I'll take from that in order that we can draw some conclusions about the position of the Imam within the Quran. So the first verse that I mentioned was chapter 21, verse 105. The next verse in the Holy Quran, which relates to the Imam of the time, is chapter 24, verse 55. The verse, it says, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. That Allah has promised those who believe from amongst you and those who act righteously, لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ كَمَا اسْتَخْلَفَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. That He will make them inherit the earth as He made those before Him inherit it. And then He says what? It says, وَلَا يُمَكِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَدَى. And He will establish their religion which He has approved. That this verse over here, it is speaking that there will be a group of individuals. Allah will make them inherit the earth in the ways those before them inherited the earth. The Quran, when it speaks about those who inherited the earth before, it says, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard. It says what? O Adam, we are making you a khalifa. That it refers to the hujjah of Allah inheriting the earth. You find Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they would state that this verse is in reference towards the 12th Imam. That the 6th Imam would say that that individual who will be the Khalifa upon this earth is the 12th Imam. At the 3rd level, I go to the next verse. The next verse, it's a verse you've all heard. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif, Lam, Mim. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. And who are these muttaqeen? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. That Alif, Lam, Mim, there is no doubt within that book. A guide for the God-fearing. And these God-fearing are those who believe in the unseen. You know, when you define ghaib, there are a number of things which are ghaib. Anything which is not mahsus, which we don't experience with our senses, is considered ghaib. That Allah is unseen. The day of judgment is unseen. Even for us, the Prophet of God is considered unseen. You know, they come up to the Prophet of God. They say to him, Ya Rasulullah, are we your companions? Rasulullah said, you guys are like the thorns upon my side. Then he says, then they say, who are your real companions? He says, my real companions are those in Akhirul Zaman, that they'll believe in me without seeing me. And this is that reality. And under this category of ghaib and unseen, you find that Imam is ghaib and unseen for us. That's why in the book, Al-Ma'ani Al-Akhbar, our 6th Imam says that in this verse, one of the meanings of ghaib is the rising of the 12th Imam. So I've come to the 3rd verse. Now verse number 4, it says what? هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بالحق ودين عفوا هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على دين كله وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ. It says what? It says He is the one who sent His Prophet with guidance, and that truthful religion which will prevail over all other religions, even though the mushrikun, they dislike this. I say that has a time come where Islam has prevailed over every other religion. Rasulullah would say that in my lineage there will be Mahdi. At his time, every household will accept Islam. But you know, people, they mention this narration. You've heard the narrations that the Imam will come with his sword and he'll cut head after head. But no, the reality of the Imam is the reality of Rasulullah. Rasulullah did not take out the sword until it was a defensive battle, until he had to. That for the first 53 years of his life, he doesn't take out the sword. You find our 12th Imam will be a mercy for mankind in the way Rasulullah was a mercy for mankind. Even the way he act will be like the previous Imams. You know, they come to the 6th Imam. They saw that the 6th Imam was wearing decent clothing, clothing which was intact. The man says to the 6th Imam that how can you wear clothing like this when your grandfather Ali used to wear shattered, broken, ripped clothing? The Imam replies by saying, in the time period of my grandfather, the people were poor. He was the leader. He had to experience what the poor experience. In my time, people are well off. If I dress like that, I wouldn't gain respect. But under this nicer clothing, I wear clothing which is rough against me. But he says, in the time period of Al-Qa'im, my son Al-Qa'im, he will wear the same clothing his grandfather Ali would wear, because at that time the world will be in poverty. That today, don't we see that 70, 80, whatever the percent of the world, it's in poverty. The Imam who is going to be that just leader will feel the pain of those who are suffering upon this earth. You find this was the next verse. The verse after that, it says, وَبِسْمِ اللَّهِ الرَّحْمَنِ الرَّحِيمِ وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. It says, we desire to make those who are oppressed upon this earth imams, and we made them inheritors. Another verse which refers towards the Imam of our time. And I could go through verse after verse, but it's important that we understand what the reality of this Imam is. Who is this Imam? You know, this is that Imam. Each prophet would say the next prophet would come. Adam would say Nuh would come. Nuh would say Musa will come. Musa would say Isa would come.